As Jim was throwing out the trash, he heard his neighbor's dog barking non-stop. At first, he thought it was just being protective and assumed that it would stop soon, but the barking kept going all night. Jim wondered if his neighbor was away. Trying to sleep was hard with the noisy dog. Days passed and the barking continued. Jim got fed up and decided to talk to his neighbor, but as he got closer to their door, he got a strange feeling. Behind the barking dog, Jim saw something that left him stunned, realizing there was more to the situation than he thought. "That's it. I'm going over there now," Jim thought to himself on the third day. He had tried to be patient, and he hadn't wanted to disturb his neighbor, Mr. Wilson, but he had had enough of it now. The barking had been going on for days on end, and Jim felt like he was going crazy. All he wanted was some peace and quiet. He had already texted Mr. Wilson to ask if he was at home, but he never received any reply. Jim hadn't thought much of it at first because Mr. Wilson was an older man, and he did not use his phone as often. He just assumed that he hadn't seen the message, or maybe he'd forgotten to reply. Jim was normally very patient and understanding with Mr. Wilson and his dog Buster. Buster did bark often, and it could be a little bit annoying, but Jim had gotten used to it over the years. However, it had never been this extreme, and he simply could not handle it anymore. He barged outside, ready to confront Mr. Wilson. As he made his way to Mr. Wilson's front door, he already thought about what he was going to say. He wanted to show that he was really annoyed, but he didn't want to come off as angry. Jim took a deep break before ringing the bell to calm himself down, and he waited for Mr. Wilson's face to appear in the hallway. He waited and waited, but Mr. Wilson didn't come to open the door. Jim raised an eyebrow, and he rang the bell another time, but again, there was no movement to be seen inside the house. He even knocked on the door a few times, but it was in vain. That was strange. He tried to push open the door, but it was locked. There was no sign of Buster either. Jim focused on the barking and realized that it was probably coming from the back of the house. He walked over to the garden fence and tried to peek through it, but he couldn't see anything. There was only one way he could do to stop the barking, and in order to do that, he had to jump over the fence. However, he could not climb this fence without anything else to stand on. He quickly returned to his own house and grabbed a little ladder from the garden shed. This would probably be tall enough for him to climb over the fence. Buster was still barking loudly as Jim made his way to Mr. Wilson's garden fence. He put the ladder into place and made his way onto the tallest step. He held onto the fence tightly as he climbed up and finally peeked over it and into Mr. Wilson's garden. It was empty, but nothing seemed to be out of place. It looked normal, and there was no sign that anything strange had happened. Nonetheless, Jim had a feeling that something was wrong. Buster's incessant barking alarmed Jim, a behavior he'd never witnessed before. Concerned, Jim entered Mr. Wilson's garden and called out to him, but received no response. Despite attempting to calm Buster, the dog continued to bark furiously, heightening Jim's unease. Approaching the house, Jim noticed a broken window, signaling possible intrusion. Deciding to investigate, Jim opened the window and cautiously entered, finding the house in disarray. Furniture overturned, belongings scattered, and signs of struggle indicated a violent disturbance. Amidst the unsettling silence, Buster's barking persisted, amplifying the sense of dread as Jim navigated through the chaos, searching for answers. In the living room, Jim found personal items strewn about, creating a sense of invasion into Mr. Wilson's life. The disorder hinted at a violent, targeted attack rather than a simple break-in. Realizing the severity of the situation, Jim embarked on a search through the house, discovering traces of Mr. Wilson's existence, but no sign of the man himself. In the study, Jim encountered Mr. Wilson's neglected phone, amplifying his concern as he scrolled through unanswered messages. Each detail of the abandoned house deepened Jim's worry, suggesting a sudden interruption to Mr. Wilson's routine. Signs of a hasty departure or potential abduction added to the mystery, intensifying Jim's sense of isolation amidst the unanswered questions. Leaving the disquieting scene behind, Jim sought answers from the neighbors, hoping to unravel the unsettling disappearance that had gripped their community. The neighbors greeted Jim with curiosity and concern, sharing recent observations that hinted at the events leading up to Mr. Wilson's disappearance. They discussed sightings of a mysterious car parked outside his house, a detail that added intrigue to the unfolding mystery. Each neighbor's account contributed to the puzzle, offering snippets of information that Jim diligently pieced together. As Jim listened to their stories, he felt the shared worry for Mr. Wilson grow palpable. The community's fondness for the quiet man and their shock at his disappearance underscored their collective unease. The mysterious car became a focal point of speculation, with varying descriptions heightening its significance in their minds. Inside Mr. Wilson's house, Jim noticed a torn piece of fabric hanging from the broken window, a tangible sign of forced entry. Recognizing its importance, he carefully collected it as potential evidence. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, Jim called the police, reporting the disappearance, break-in, and Buster's incessant barking. As he waited for the authorities, Jim sat on the front porch, consumed by tension and uncertainty. When the police arrived, Jim provided them with details about Mr. Wilson's routines and the recent events, hoping to aid their investigation. Each question reminded him of the gravity of the situation and the urgency of finding his neighbor. Officers meticulously processed the scene, documenting evidence and marking key points of interest, while Jim observed with a mix of relief and anxiety. With the official investigation underway, there was hope that the gathered clues would shed light on Mr. Wilson's disappearance. The police's arrival brought a transformation to the neighborhood, with yellow tape marking Mr. Wilson's property as an official investigation zone. As officers conducted interviews and canvassed the area, Jim found himself pulled aside for questioning about his relationship with Mr. Wilson and recent neighborhood changes, offering insights into the missing man's life. Elsewhere, neighbors became potential witnesses, sharing concerns and speculations with officers. Each account contributed to the evolving narrative, pieced together through the meticulous efforts of law enforcement. Additional signs of a struggle found in Mr. Wilson's house reinforced the possibility of abduction, heightening community unease. As news of the investigation spread, the once tranquil neighborhood was gripped by a shared sense of vulnerability. Residents watched from their windows, unsettled by the unfolding events. Meanwhile, Buster's distress, evident as he was taken to the vet, hinted at a deeper trauma beyond human understanding, suggesting that something disturbing had occurred at Mr. Wilson's house. Despite the vet's attempts to soothe him, Buster remained anxious, showing concern not for himself, but for Mr. Wilson. His gaze kept returning to the door, his body tensed as if ready to rush back to his owner's house. Jim observed Buster's behavior, touched by the depth of their bond, which persisted even in distress. As Jim drove Buster home from the vet, he reflected on the dog's unwavering loyalty. Buster's agitation seemed more than just separation anxiety. It was as if he was trying to convey something crucial about Mr. Wilson's disappearance. Jim wondered if understanding Buster's behavior could offer a unique perspective on the case, one only a loyal canine companion could provide. Back at Mr. Wilson's house, Buster's actions continued to offer subtle clues. He paused at certain spots, whined softly, or barked at shadows and sounds. Jim closely watched these reactions, hoping to glean insights from the dog's instincts. Perhaps Buster's behavior, driven by his bond with Mr. Wilson, could lead Jim closer to understanding what happened to his neighbor and where he might be. News of Mr. Wilson's disappearance quickly spread throughout the community, sparking concern and speculation among neighbors who gathered in small groups to share information. The once quiet neighborhood buzzed with talk of the mystery, each person affected by the unsettling news that had disrupted their tranquil lives. As neighbors shared sightings and stories, Jim diligently recorded observations and timelines in his notebook, piecing together the events of the past days. Despite conflicting details, each account added to the intricate narrative of Mr. Wilson's disappearance. Feeling a sense of duty, Jim systematically collected information, spoke to neighbors, and became a focal point for community efforts to find Mr. Wilson. The community rallied together, offering support and resources to aid in the search, demonstrating solidarity in their shared endeavor to bring Mr. Wilson home. With collective efforts, a clearer picture of the events surrounding Mr. Wilson's disappearance began to emerge, revealing a story more complex and troubling than initially imagined. In Mr. Wilson's study, Jim stumbled upon threatening letters hidden in a drawer, hinting at a motive behind his disappearance and casting a dark shadow over his seemingly peaceful life. As Jim examined the letters, they unveiled a grave threat and hinted at a hidden aspect of Mr. Wilson's life. The menacing tone and dire implications suggested Mr. Wilson's entanglement in something dangerous that may have finally caught up with him. Jim's realization of the heightened stakes left his heart racing. The discovery of the letters intensified the gravity of the situation. It was no longer just a missing person case, but a sinister plot unfolding under their noses. Recognizing the significance of the letters, Jim knew he had to promptly share their contents with the authorities. Time was now of the essence in this urgent matter. Further investigation led Jim to uncover details of a long-buried scandal involving Mr. Wilson, suggesting that past events were now haunting him. As Jim dug deeper, he realized that unraveling this old scandal might hold the key to understanding Mr. Wilson's disappearance. The investigation took a more intricate turn when Mr. Wilson's abandoned car was found in a remote location. Inside, scattered financial documents and cryptic notes hinted at clandestine dealings with unknown parties. Jim saw a connection between these findings and the local scandal, suggesting a complex web of motives and intrigue. With each revelation, the investigation shed light on the darker side of the seemingly tranquil community. Whispers turned into open discussions as residents confronted the unsettling truth that their neighborhood harbored secrets and lies, disrupting the facade of peace. As Jim delved deeper, he realized the perilous nature of the truths he pursued, balancing the desire to uncover reality with the need to protect himself and the community from potential consequences. The pursuit of truth threatened to disrupt the foundations of everything once believed to be certain. In a dramatic turn, Jim faced the person he had discovered to be responsible for Mr. Wilson's disappearance. In an intense confrontation, Jim's words were fueled by a mix of anger, disbelief, and a desperate need for answers. The individual's admission of guilt, while expected, sent shockwaves through Jim, confirming the betrayal and deceit that had been hiding in plain sight. As the truth unraveled, the extent of the deceit within the community became painfully clear. Trusted faces turned out to be masks hiding sinister motives. The web of betrayal stretched far and wide, entangling innocent lives. Jim listened in horror as the confessions and revelations painted a picture of a community corrupted by secrets and lies, its fabric torn apart by hidden agendas. The investigation's climax revealed a shocking truth. Mr. Wilson had been kidnapped in an attempt to silence him from exposing a crime. The crime, buried under years of deceit, involved individuals whom the community had respected and trusted. Jim, while relieved to finally understand the motive behind the disappearance, felt a profound sense of dismay at the dark underbelly of his seemingly peaceful neighborhood. With the truth out, the police moved swiftly to bring the culprits to justice. The person responsible for Mr. Wilson's disappearance was arrested, and in a relieving turn of events, Mr. Wilson was found and safely returned home. The community, once shaken by the ordeal, began to feel a sense of closure as justice was served. For Jim, seeing Mr. Wilson safe was a bittersweet resolution to the harrowing journey. In the aftermath, the community was left to reflect on the events that had unfolded. People came together, supporting each other through the recovery process. For Jim, the experience had irrevocably changed his perspective. He had seen the darkness lurking beneath the surface of his neighborhood, but also witnessed the resilience and unity of its people. As he walked the familiar streets, he knew life would go on, but the echoes of the ordeal would linger in the community's collective memory. If this story touched you as much as it did us, you should watch this video. Man catches his wife with horse in barn doing this, he turns pale. Click here to get the full story.